We spent every day this work period of this year and this Congress trying to recover the 8 million jobs that the Republicans lost. The other side has come to work every day trying to kill jobs and make sure economic recovery doesn't interfere with their campaign message.
The other side is trying to kill jobs. It is getting ugly up there just in time for August recess.
He's a job killer. He's a job killer. Top Line starts right now.
Welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Jonathan Karl.
And I'm David Curley, in for Rick Klein, who is kind of out having some fun today.
Each day we bring you completely unrehearsed, unbiased news on all things political. And with that, David, what is your top line?
Prop 8, is it deep sixed? Just yesterday, a federal judge said the Proposition 8 in California, the ban against gay marriage, is unconstitutional, does not follow the laws. It is out for now. But there's a question of whether or not this will be stayed while it goes to an appeals court. It is going to the appeals court, likely to come to the Supreme Court as well. This one is a political hot potato we've been talking about for years and will be talking about for years.
Undoubtedly, and it seems almost certain this will go to the Supreme Court. And the line on this now is, will this be the kind of Roe v. Wade decision, something that really kind of defines a new battle in the culture wars that we will see for decades to come?
In a couple of years.
In a couple of years, exactly. Next up, Lifeline. The president is out in Chicago today campaigning for an old basketball buddy, Alexei Giannoulias, who is locked in a tough race for the president's own Senate seat. And let me say, David, this is a seat, this is a race that is particularly close to home. It is one of the closest races in the entire country right now. Republican Mark Curt, of course, has had problems of his own. Giannoulias has been called the mob banker. It's kind of the liar versus the crook is the way they're playing this. But this is a really important race. There is a 4-to-1 funding advantage for the Republican. The president will cut that in half today with a single fundraiser.
It is amazing how much trouble both candidates have had, because it looked like it was going to be Democratic. Then Kirk was looking strong. Then he had some issues with his National Guard service and back and forth. You're right. And we actually get to see a couple of the fundraisers today, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
We don't always get to see these. Next up, tweet back. Yes, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House is coming back in special session. How did she let everybody know? Through Twitter, of course. It is the new wave, right? And they are coming back basically to help states, because the states are really hurting. An economist basically said, if we don't do something for the states, this recovery could actually slip back. They're going to try and pass billions of dollars in aid to the states.
But the reason why they're coming back, as well as the Senate actually was able to pass this state aid bill, much to many people's surprise, the Senate acted on this. But Republicans will have a lot of fun with this, though, because they will say, finally, they come rushing back to town to do what? To spend more money.
Another stimulus, in essence, is what it is.
$26 billion. Finally demented. Check out this from Henry Waxman talking about the potential bright side for Democrats losing a lot of seats. He says, I think a lot of the House seats we're going to lose are those who have been the toughest for the Democrats to pull in line, the Democrats that have been the most difficult. So good riddance to all those moderate blue dogs who may be losing. He seems to be channeling Jim DeMint, of course, from a very different ideological perspective, who famously said he'd rather have 30 strong conservatives in the Senate than a 60-seat majority with a lot of squishy moderates.
And what does that do for governing? We know what it does for the liberals and we know what it does for the conservatives, but what does it do for governing?
That's a good question. So we will get to it all right now with our guest, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, Democrat of Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I want to ask you about the big vote today, Elena Kagan. But before we get to any of that, interesting news in your own state yesterday. Sarah Palin weighing in on the Republican gubernatorial battle, endorsing a guy by the name of Brian Murphy over former Governor Bob Ehrlich in the Republican primary. So my question to you is, before this happened yesterday, had you ever heard of Brian Murphy?
I must confess I had not. I think this is an interesting development for the Republican Party in Maryland. I think this endorsement just shows how extreme the Sarah Palin movement is within the Republican Party. Mr. Murphy is just not known in Maryland. Bob Ehrlich's well known. So this endorsement caught everybody by surprise.
And so what does it mean in the long run? Is it going to make a difference?
I don't think it's going to make a difference. I think it just helps Martin O'Malley, our Democrat, our incumbent governor. We're united. The Democratic Party is united, and I think Marylanders want to move forward, and I think it's going to help give Governor O'Malley even a stronger election prospect.
Let's come back to the Kagan vote. It comes today. Little doubt that she's going to pass. You went on the floor, though, and talked about, and we usually hear this from the conservative side about activist judges. You're very concerned about an activist court right now, but on the other side, a conservative activist court. Kagan doesn't really change the formula much, but she goes to serve and does what?
Well, I think she gives balance to the court. I think she'll follow in the best traditions of Justice Stevens, that she'll follow legal precedent, give due deference to Congress, and advance individual rights against the abuses of power, whether it's corporate America or government. So I think she'll bring the type of leadership on the Supreme Court that will help ordinary Americans in their fight against big government and big special interest.
What about the fact that she's going to go in with even fewer votes than Sotomayor? It seems almost certain. What does this say about where we're at? I mean, obviously there were Sotomayor only had 68 votes. On the other side, Alito only had 58 votes. I mean, Supreme Court nominees used to go in often with everybody voting yes.
Well, I think this is extremely disappointing. Elena Kagan is well qualified to serve on the bench. She represents mainstream views. She was thought to be a relatively safe appointment by the president, and yet we see the Republicans in large numbers saying, look, we're not going to go with any appointment by a Democratic president.
When you go home, what are you expecting this summer to hear? We've heard the Republicans saying loud and clear that the problem with the Democratic Congress is that they're spending too much money and they're not getting the job done. What are you hearing at home?
Well, I think people want us to focus on getting out of this recession, creating jobs. I think they want us.
But they're saying you're creating too much government, big government.
Well, I don't know. I think that if you look at the recovery funds that have come forward, at least in my state, people are happy that we're putting people back to work. You know, the bill that we're passing in a few minutes that will help our local governments is fully paid for. It's not adding to the deficit, and it's going to save and create jobs in my state of Maryland. I think Marylanders want us to be actively involved in creating new opportunities for employment in our state.
So what do you think? I got to ask you about what Henry Waxman said, saying that some of the Democrats will lose. These are the difficult Democrats, you know, the moderates, the ones that give you guys headaches sometimes in terms of party unity. Does he have a point?
I don't think that's what he meant. We're proud of the diversity in our party. We have a broad tent. We have different views within the Democratic Party, but we all agree that government can help solve our problems, and we want government to be there to control the abuses of Wall Street, to control the abuses of corporate America, to provide opportunities for all Americans. So, look, I hope we can continue to have a very diversified caucus. I think it's in our interest.
I want to ask you very quickly, the Attorney General is holding a news conference today announcing that they are charging several alleged terrorists, including an American who is in Somalia. We're hearing more and more about Somalia and al-Shabaab and its connections to al-Qaeda. Has Somalia become ground zero for growing terrorists who are opposed to America?
I don't believe it's ground zero. I think ground zero still remains the Pakistan-Afghan border. But Somalia is a country of major interest to the United States, and we're finding more and more terrorist activities being sheltered in that country, and we're going to go after them.
Major interest in what way?
We find terrorists are being trained in Somalia, and they're coming, their interests are in the United States. That's of concern, and I'm glad to see that the administration is going after those terrorist networks.
All right, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, thank you so much for joining us here on Top Line.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Appreciate it.